Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of The Ways We Move. My name is Nicholas Zart, and I will be your host again today. And today we have a special guest. Her name is Marilyn Smith, and she is a professor at Georgia Tech and also the director of the Vertical Lift Research Center of Excellence. Now, Marilyn is amazing, and well, take it away, Marilyn.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Smith. I've been a professor here at Georgia Tech in the School of Aerospace Engineering since 1997. My primary research areas are unsteady aerodynamics, computational aeroelasticity, and I am currently the director of the Vertical Lift Research Center of Excellence here at Georgia Tech.
And you guys have been doing a lot of great work. In fact, I think most of the people who will be either listening to us or watching us, most people somehow have either studied with you guys, have come out of your school. But it's true. It's impressive how many people have come out of Georgia Tech in our industry. So tell us a little bit about the institute because I know you guys do a lot of work, and then we can talk about something that we keep on hearing a lot about Downwash, but I don't think really
Mhm.
people really know what they're talking about most of the time, at least for most people.
Yeah. So Georgia Tech is one of the biggest producers of engineers in the country. But I like to say we're not a factory. We do have some pretty high standards, and of course, our students
Yes,
are excellent.
true.
And so we pride ourselves on being the place that everyone can come to because we are a very affordable university. I couldn't
True.
have gone if that wasn't true. I worked my way through school myself. The co-op program was very helpful. But we are a fairly big also is the School of Aerospace Engineering because we have all three tracks at the undergraduate level even. So you can do the traditional aeronautics track with fixed wing. You can do the space track with space capstone design and all those courses, or you can do rotorcraft, which leads us right into what we do today. And that's why I think you see a lot of people will come to Georgia Tech. And of course, over the years, we've risen in the rankings, and I think currently we're in the top 5 for both undergraduate and graduate. And we've been there for quite a few
Wow.
years. So,
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, no, I think your reputation is cemented and that's for sure. So tell us about this is something that we hear very often in advanced air mobility about downwash. What does downwash mean to somebody who doesn't really fully understand that? And we can then go further into that.
yeah, so downwash basically is nothing more than the velocity that's generated by the rotor. And we say down because it's coming down on you. So we're assuming that the rotor is vertical and you're beneath the rotor.
Right.
But you will get this velocity, in the simplest sense, if we use very simple momentum theory, which is, piece of paper on an envelope or bleh, pen and paper, pen and paper on the back of an envelope. Momentum
Yep.
theory, it's a constant number. In reality, of course, depending on what's happening above you, it can vary. Um,
Yeah.
there are basic numbers where it can get to be quite dangerous to be within that downwash for various reasons. There have been accidents where people have been like unexpectedly knocked over and have
Mhm.
have encountered serious injuries and even death. Um, and also, the other thing is not just the personnel that are beneath you. You have to get in and out. So obviously, if you're trying to get
Yes.
injured person out, you don't want them in the downwash. But even at lower speeds, you have to be careful because the downwash velocity can hit the ground, and whatever is not pinned down, mainly sand, snow, all these things that can be picked up. It'll swirl back in to the rotor. You get kind of a recirculation fountain effect, if you will. And those can be problems, whether you're talking about on the ground or in flight. If you've heard the term brownout, that's when you're
Right.
recirculating the dirt and it's brown.
Yep.
Whiteout is just snow or perhaps water if you're doing marine operations. But that can have an impact on your life cycle of your rotor because you know when you drive through gravelly areas, you get pits and
Yep.
stuff in your car. Same thing happens on your rotor blades. So that's a problem, and you certainly don't want to get hit by one of them either, because that'll stink.
No.
But
It's true. You actually bring two good points in here. Rotor blades in desert places, especially in the Middle East and everything. I heard that they have a 20% shorter lifespan than other rotor blades elsewhere. And I think there was a really good point about brownouts. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, there was an accident in California on the Kern Valley where a sheriff helicopter or an EMS helicopter, I can't remember, but landed, and that was a brownout. And of course, they lost tragically life. The tail snapped off, and it was absolutely horrible.
right, yeah,
Um,
if the pilot can't see and you're not running on instruments, you're in trouble at that point, because if you're close to the ground, there's no way to recover if you do come down too fast.
Absolutely. So, and it's one thing to talk about a helicopter that has one big rotor. Now we're talking about multi-rotor electric vehicles, and what does that mean? How will that be affected? Because now we're talking about different types of
Hmm.
downwash and outwash too, and everything. So, how does this now? How do you compute all of that?
Well, we can compute it either using, like I said, the very basic, simple momentum theory, which is, just basic uh, stream tubes and things like that, one-dimensional theory, all the way up to we use Navier-Stokes if you want to get all the very complicated interactions. We can calculate that. It can get quite expensive if you have a full vehicle and many rotors going on, but it is important. What that varies from the single main rotor is that depending on, the how close multiple rotors are together, are there
Mm,
different
yep.
tilt angles and, do you get interactions between the two? Then your wakes, when they come down, they can interact. They could negate each other, but they could kind of
Mm,
exacerbate some of the negative behavior you don't want to see. Uh, to understand that, that's when you do need to run the very complicated simulations, things that we and other universities in the field have been doing. If you're pretty far away, you don't have to worry about it. I can't remember exactly the number. I think it's Oh, I wanna say 3, but I could be off. I think it's actually closer than that, and you
okay.
won't get the interaction, but it depends on so many variables,
Right. Right.
and, if you add the ground,
Yep.
that that makes it worse. If you're trying to land as, a lot of these different, plans are, for some of the, urban air mobility, the air taxi type things. If you wanna land on a landing strip and it's surrounded on 2 or 3 sides by buildings, then your downwash goes outward and then it hits those buildings and then that's gonna come down and hit again. So again, you have to do a very serious analysis, just not of the rotor itself, but its surroundings, and those can get to be quite expensive. Um, a
It's
colleague of
true.
mine here at Georgia Tech, Jürgen Rauleiter, has been doing quite a few experimental tests of multi-rotors near obstacles and things so that we can characterize what's happening there. Because it's not just the people on the ground, but it's also the control because the
Yep.
interactions of the different rotors changes. And then, of course, you have to have pilot control or your control laws, the theory that's behind your computer control, your automatic flight control system has to be able to take that into account. So it has implications across the board.
Considering how many propellers you have and everything. Just one clarification. When you say 3, you're talking about 3 feet, right?
Uh,
Distance.
Sorry, three rotor diameters.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, okay, that makes more. Okay, that was like 3
Yeah,
feet. That's a
sorry.
lot. No,
It's
no.
it's
So,
typical speak. We speak of rotor diameters, and that's
yes,
our
that
non-dimensionalization.
that's perfect. Okay, that's perfect for the clarification. So would it be would you say that the more rotors we have, the safer it is? But then again, it really does depend, you're right, on the pitch of the rotors, and
Yeah.
some of them have dual rotors too. So that,
Yeah.
of course, complicates everything further.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, well, depending on how they're doing the coaxial rotors, the ones on top of
Yep.
each other. Again, uh, typically they'll help and they'll straighten the flow out. But
Okay.
and that's another thing, the flow in the most general sense is coming down, but in reality it's coming down, but it also has a swirl
Yes.
associated with it. So, you get these other components in the planar direction, if you will. Um, I don't know that more rotors is safer. I mean, define safe.
Right.
Are
Good
we
point.
talking about people on the ground? Are we talking about rotor controls? Are we talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
complexity of your vehicle? How many rotors, if they degrade over time, you've got to account for that. And certainly reliability, affordability, maintainability all comes into play. So safe is a relative term.
Safe is a very relative term, but it's also something that we wake up with and fall asleep with every single day of our lives.
Yes.
I think most of us also have this. We probably have all seen the crash of these ospreys as they come in on the air carrier and everything. And in layman's term, isn't it a question of all of a sudden you have a lot of importance on one side and not enough on the other, and that's why you tip over. So that's why the approach of a vertiport must be very important to you guys. Do you see things that make you raise your hair when you look at some of these designs? Because I know we certainly did in the beginning. Less now. It's just becoming a little bit more mature. But are there things that make you scratch your head and go, "Oh no, 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 no"?
Well, the original Vertiport planning guidelines from the FAA, I was really scratching my
Oh,
head over because it didn't really, it was dealing with the long-term approach, but not the actual
yes.
operation where you're going to have a vertical component to it. I'm happy to say that since then, uh, they've had a lot of discussions with the rotorcraft community, and they've actually are now going to merge the heliport and the vertiport guidelines together into one.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
important, and I think it's important to note that the FAA is listening to the people who are doing the research and the engineering, and
Yes.
it's a good thing. They are not
Yes.
trying to work in a vacuum. But, there are a lot of problems we have to deal with since we're not flying into a traditional airport or even a traditional heliport, which, if you look at those heliport designs, they've tried to put them where there's nothing around. Okay. There's no blockage. There's no
True.
people around that.
True.
You look at hospitals and stuff, it's kind of on a platform way off over here.
Yep.
But now we're talking about being in the middle of everything. And that does raise some major concerns of mine. I
Yep.
have been thinking about this probably for the past decade,
Mm.
because the atmospheric environment that we talk about in flying, even approaches and departures coming in and out of this corridor. They're talking about taking off from a building, going along a road, and then you climb up higher above the cityscape. Uh, but it's interesting because even though the approach and the takeoff, the terminal operations, if you would,
Yep.
could be such a small part of your flight, it's
Right.
also the most dangerous.
It's
Not
the most
only
dangerous.
because, yeah, we're close to the ground, we're close to other things, and then on top of that, we are flying in, especially if it's in an urban environment, we're probably flying within what's called the roughness sublayer of the atmosphere.
Mm.
And from that, we have all of the highly unsteady, very transient flow that you get in that roughness sublayer. The closest thing I could say to what it is just think about driving behind those big 18-wheeler trucks,
Yes.
and you get too close to them, or the wind in that particular area is a certain direction, certain speed, and you are just everywhere,
Boom.
right? Well,
Yep.
I mean, the same thing's going to be true, except now you're in flight, so not only do you have to maintain your lateral and directional headings, if you will, but you also have your vertical to take into account
Yep.
as well. So that is very, very important. It is something that I think, well, I have been actually working on it for 5 years now, and we've got some really neat approaches, I think, on how to resolve that and get that information to the pilots and engineers. It's something that most folks hadn't really thought of because they were more focused on, do we have the technology to actually build the vehicles? But now we talk about operations and safety, and at least in the United States and the EU, UK regions, I know for
True.
us, safety is probably number one in these kinds of operations. But it's not just passenger vehicles. We talk
No.
about drones and package delivery and oversight of surveillance, things like that. We certainly don't want those unmanned vehicles or drones, whichever term you like, to fly into a building,
Yes.
to fly into one another, or to a person, or to just drop out of the sky. So uh, they behave differently than the heavier vehicles with people on them do. So again, you have to come up with an approach to estimate all of this unsteady downwash, outwash, transient environment so that it is scalable to different size vehicles. And that's another problem in and of itself.
Yeah, you raise a lot of great points. The first one I wanted to circle back on is it's true. The FAA has done an incredible job, and it's more than just words. They are reaching out. They do want to hear about the not only the OEMs but even us on the infrastructure side of things. How do we see this? How do we plan for this? And you're right, EB-105 and EB-105A, what a difference. And of course, I'm also active in Europe, and it's very interesting to see how they're both sort of competing with each other, but they're sort of catching up
Mhm.
with each other. Another thing too that I think we never really think about as much. We always think of downwash, for at least for us, when it comes to the TLOF or right around that, the whole landing area and everything. But another thing too that I was thinking about is the different pathways, the different corridors. You can have an eVTOL, a fairly heavy eVTOL flying over here, and a bunch of drones flying under that. There's
Yeah.
going to be a lot of interference here, and
Yeah. It's just
and
like airport spacing. Same problem.
Absolutely, except for one thing, and this is a big problem in our industry, is the UAV and passenger eVTOL side of the equation do not talk enough with one
Oh, no,
another. And
no.
that is a big danger. That is really dangerous because we really need to know much more what is your operational envelope on both sides so that we can coordinate that. And it's kind of sad to say, but I think our hands are kind of tied right now on the infrastructure side because we're kind of waiting for everybody to really tell us what is it, how will it work and everything, and then we can offer you
Yeah.
the world. So yeah, it's a little frustrating. It's good to know that you've been working on that for a while, and yes, it is much more robust and mature than it was 10 years ago when we were thinking about hopping from one building top to another.
Well, I think the technology is beginning. I don't want to say mature, but I think we have a much better handle on it. And
Right.
I think that because people are really starting to understand and think about this, that we're very close to getting estimates to quantify this with our
Yes.
pilots. One of the big differences, is that you can't replicate exactly an environment. Just the atmospheric conditions from hour to hour, day to day, they change. And even though you might, on paper, it sounds like the same conditions as a prior day,
Nope.
it might be different. The other thing is that it varies from location to location. So when I'm flying
Yes.
here in Atlanta and somebody's flying the same thing in San Francisco, we're going to have drastically different conditions. So whatever we do has to be portable to a
Yes.
specific locale. And that again is something that we've been working on. But you can't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to characterize a city. That is not
No.
sustainable that way. So we need to think smarter, out of the box. Think of something that gives us the local flight area that can be ported to whatever city or whatever environment we're in. Um,
Yeah, that's, not too long ago we had Don Burkoff from True Weather Solutions come on the show, and he also mentioned something that's very crucial, that we only have data points that are 10 kilometers apart. Now, there's a lot of variation in between that for the most part, right? And under 5,000 feet, we
Mhm.
don't really know all that much. The other
Yeah.
point we brought up is that everybody's been to San Francisco, right? You're walking in shorts and t-shirts one block. All of a sudden, you feel like you need a big turtleneck or something like that. I always thought the one of the most interesting case for vertiport networks is within that city. Urban air mobility in San Francisco raises a lot of questions. How will you handle that, especially with the first generation of eVTOLs that we have right now? So I wonder what's your take on all of that, because it's also a question of the weather data that we also have that we just don't
Yes.
really have as much as we need to have right now. Then we'll
Well,
get to the designs of the vertiports, which is another nightmare.
I actually think we do have that information because even though, the stations themselves may be 10 kilometers apart, if we're smart, if we use GIS databases, which
Yeah.
basically tells us, the locations and the terrain, including buildings and things like that. If we use that, the knowledge we have from all the weather, from meteorology, we can actually estimate this. But it's funny you say this because that flight below, not even below 5,000 feet, below 2,000 feet,
Yep.
we are in that roughness sublayer that I was talking about earlier. And you cannot use a one size fits all solution. You have to go to the local environment. You have to be able to predict your local behavior from the buildings or the trees or the wind turbines or whatever's around you. You have to estimate that. That's what I've been doing for the past 5 years. We're about to roll something out. Um, I think it's going to be quite useful. Yes. Our goal is number one is safety. But number two is to understand what happens so that we can estimate what impact that has on the vehicle. We were talking about brownout and how the particulates and things will impact your rotor blade life. So the life cycle of these components are going to be modified by what transients they're flying through because there's more vibration. Vibration is bad for fatigue and life cycle. So we're trying
Yes.
to understand how that might impact it. And the other thing we have to remember that's important is that all of these different designs use carbon fiber or advanced materials.
hmm
And we don't really know in a lot of instances how they're going to behave in these highly unsteady downwash rotor configurations and the unsteady transients that they're flying through in the cities. So, there's a lot of things that cascade from this, not just safety, but well, I could everything come back to safety, but
Yes, of
it's
course.
not just the passenger comfort, the immediate safety of getting off and landing, but also the long-term impacts on the vehicle. So,
That's true, and that's always something that we struggle a lot with. Building a network of vertiports in North Dakota, or down here in Tucson, or we're right here where we are, where it's much more humid, or in California.
mm,
I mean, those are the
yes,
things that we need to take into consideration. And that's why every multi-port is a different story, is a unique story, and hence making it really hard to to figure out how much. People always ask me how much does a vertiport cost, and it's like, well, which one, where, and how, and
yes,
when. Okay, that's the whole point.
exactly,
So
exactly.
so so one of the things that we do here on the ways we move is we also want to talk about the people behind, the architects of the future. You're one of them. And we want to know a little bit more about what motivates you to do all this work. I mean, it's highly fascinating, but what gets you up in the morning?
You know, to me, this is one of the most exciting times I've had in my career, and it's been a long career, unfortunately. Um, but the fact that perhaps what we're developing, even if you don't use it directly, but if it makes you think, and the fact that we can have an impact on, for me, safety in particular, for this, we're looking at a lot of different use cases. We've talked some about here. Another one is designing vertiports around hospitals. Talking
Yeah.
to some folks in the UK, where how do you best site it without having to spend so much money on and Navier-Stokes calculations. There was an instance apparently where just a regular old single main rotor helicopter came in, and across the way and part of the car park away from that, it generated some wind that actually killed that person.
Ooh.
I
Yeah.
I don't want
No.
my field of endeavor to kill people, so I want to save them.
No.
And another thing we're looking at is how to use what we've developed in helping to fight wildfires, and that's a huge issue as well. Can we make the flight safer? Can we predict where the hot spots, where the next
Yes.
racing chute of the fire is going to go and get there faster? That's a little more immature at this time, but I'm quite hopeful. So the short answer to the very long answer I just gave you is I want to make rotorcraft in our whole area, whether you talk about advanced air mobility, whether you talk about civilian or military operations. I want to make it safer for our people who operate them, who get around them, and make it sustainable.
Rightfully so, and we're very thankful that you are doing that for us because it is important. And you're right. I think it's like an onion. Every time there's another
Oh,
layer, but
yes.
it's becoming a little bit more mature. We're getting there. And you're right, it's a multi-use approach. It also helps conventional aviation. It helps this future type of aviation and mobility in general, actually. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And I sincerely hope this is the first of many interviews we can have where we can talk about all of this, fluidic airspace of ours, and also to talk a little bit more about Georgia Tech and also about the Center of
Mhm.
excellence, because I think it's something that people really need to understand. So I really look forward to having you back on the ways we move. And Marilyn, any last thoughts before we leave? We stop.
No, I think it's really great what you're doing. Let's get this information out there. Let's
Yes,
make sure that everyone is cognizant of the facts. Sometimes we get a little bit too focused in our own areas, and we don't think about some of the broader aspects that we talked about here today. But I would be more than happy to come on anytime and talk to you, or even to give you the names of people who are probably better than I am to talk to you. There's plenty of folks out there who are way smarter than me. So,
it takes a lot of people to make something work. That's what I've noticed in the end.
yes,
So it's
yes,
all of us pulling our resources together that what makes it
indeed.
happen.
Yeah, and I,
Again,
I have I have to say my students, whether they're undergrad or grad students, they are awesome. They do, I can have the idea and it may be wild and crazy, but they're the ones that bring it to fruition, not me. So,
that's true. Well, again, thank you, Marilyn, and I look forward to seeing you again. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast with Marilyn. It's always wonderful speaking with Marilyn. I always learn a lot. And even though this one was a little bit more specific, more technical in terms of what we cover, we do like to talk about everything in the advanced mobility world, whether it's on the road, it's in the air, it's on water, it's on rail. We're always welcome your thoughts, your comments. So please like, share, of course, subscribe. And well, we'll see you very soon again.